The initial opening segment of this show saw the Authority come out, pretty much address Daniel Bryan, the status of the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, and what else was to come later in the show with the contract signing with the Shield and Evolution, all that kind of stuff. So it was a pretty standard segment until they called out Brad Maddox, and thankfully they kind of filled in the plot holes here by talking about how Brad Maddox allowed the Shield to be on commentary last week when they shouldn't have been. And Brad Maddox, for one thing, hasn't been on Raw at all, basically, in the last number of months. I mean, he initially became the Raw general manager in July of 2013, so almost 11 months ago. Almost a year ago, Brad Maddox was first named the Raw general manager, and I was fine with it, if only because Vicky Guerrero had been the GM of Raw for quite a while, and she had been in that position so many times in the past. And she eventually moved back over to SmackDown as the GM over there. But I don't know, the whole Vicky Guerrero as general manager, in my opinion, that whole shtick has really grown tiresome. That's merely my opinion. But nevertheless, back on to Brad Maddox. I mean, this guy's been GM. He did some stuff early on, like last summer when he first got named the Raw GM. He appeared on television here and there for the most part, usually in a regular role. But when the Authority became regular on-air characters, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon respectively, then he had no power, basically, because everything they did could overrule what Brad Maddox put into place. So he really served no purpose on the show at all, and that's why he was basically shunned out, so to speak, in the months that followed. In the latter half of the year and earlier this year, I know he was in the Honor the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. He named himself a competitor in that, was, I think, the first one thrown out of the matchup, which was hilarious. But, yeah, he's just served no purpose in the last year or so that it really does not make sense to have Raw general managers anymore, or for SmackDown for that matter. I mean, I loved it. I mean, I've only been a fan since '08, so I, of course, don't know the half of it. Well, I do know the half of it. I just wasn't a fan for it. But, back in even '08 and '09, GMs used to mean something. When William Regal was GM, I know I'm being biased because he's one of my favorite wrestlers, but he was a great GM during his stint. We had Mike Adamle. I know it was terrible, but that was a memorable reign nevertheless. We had Stephanie McMahon and Shane for a while. We had Vicky. I know we had the whole guest host shit, and that's kind of when it took a turn for the worse. We had Bret Hart as GM for a while. So we've had a number of GMs over the years, for better or for worse. John Laurinaitis comes to mind. But it really just jumped the shark when they put in Vicky Guerrero again as the GM, and then Brad Maddox, who did nothing. But with Vince McMahon and Triple H and Stephanie around, and Kane, who was the director of operations for a while, they really serve no purpose. So there's really no point in having a GM around. So if they name a new GM is beyond me. I'm not really sure. And if they do, I don't really care. Maybe it's a Ric Flair. Maybe it's a Hulk Hogan. Maybe it's a Sting. I know there were rumors of that a number of months ago. I don't see that happening, to be quite honest with you. But in 2014, at this point, GMs don't really serve a purpose. So I was excited to see Brad Maddox fired. Michael Cole pointed out that he was fired as general manager of Raw, not necessarily from the WWE as a whole. So it's quite possible that we could see Brad Maddox go back to being an in-ring wrestler, which was what he was before he became an administrative assistant to Vicky Guerrero early last year. He can go back to being a referee, a commentator. I know he was a commentator for a while on NXT and Main Event. So in any role that they have him in, I'm sure he'll be sticking around. But as long as he's not Raw general manager anymore, that's fine with me. So that was a solid segment to kick off the show.